being here today at our third Supplier Summer Hours. We are so excited to have you guys here, and I am super excited to have Alison with me today. Alison and I, we were just talking about it, have known each other for a really long time. Fun fact, Alison actually used to be one of my buyers that I called on. She only made me cry a little bit. And we were trying to figure out how long we've known each other.
Does anyone know when the iPhone 6 came out?
And I was like,
that was?
no, please don't age me like this. But yeah, that's how long I've been working with Alison. So
Yeah.
she's amazing. Alison, I don't want to steal too much of your thunder, but she has lot of experience at Walmart. Like I mentioned, she was my buyer in electronics. She was an amazing buyer, truly one of the best buyers I've ever called on. From there, she moved on into planning at Walmart.
I paid her before this.
Exactly, she did. It's fine. We've been bribed with wine. It's great. and now she has joined us on the dark side, the light side. I'm not sure in the supplier world. What would you say?
Definitely the light side.
The light side. We don't start at 7 a.m. It's pretty nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm really, really excited to have Alison here. We are going to be having a very candid conversation about what it means to have a working relationship with a buyer, what are buyers' expectations, and all of that good stuff. And again, Alison has many, many years of experience in this world, and I think she's going to share a lot of really great insights with us. So to kind of kick us off, Alison, if you wouldn't mind maybe talking about a little bit on your background, kind of where did you start at Walmart? What is your experience and kind of where are you today?
Yeah. So thank you guys for having me and thank you for being here. So I started with Walmart about 10 years ago. I was previously worked in store retail pretty much since I could legally work. So spent a lot of time stocking shelves and different retailers before that. Started in the buyer trainee program at Walmart when that was still a thing. I have heard rumors of it coming back. I think that would be brilliant. I don't know if it will. Worked, for the next 8 years between being a financial planner and merchandising and buying as well. And then about 3 years ago, decided to join the light side. And so I found a really great opportunity essentially to help them start an analytics team. The company I work for now, Bestway, started an analytics team and merchant support team in town. So we are now a strong team of 4 3 years later. And I'm really enjoying it on this side. But I am always happy to help understand the other side as much as I can. We know a lot has changed, especially since 2020, and not just how the retail landscape works, but also just how Walmart in general and their personnel works. So
yeah, no, and
always changing.
That's a great point. And would you mind, Alison, just kind of for the benefit of the crowd, kind of sharing which departments in Walmart that you have experience with, not only on kind of the Walmart side, but on the supplier side as well?
Yeah, so within Walmart, I started in paint and hardware. Moved over to stationery, spent a couple years there, moved into electronics, spent a couple years there, and then I landed in toys. And if anybody is a toy vendor here, I'm so sorry. But after that, I left, joined Bestway, and now we support the toys business. We also support sporting goods, home, and outdoor living. We are an outdoor recreational company, so we design, develop, and produce all kinds of products, from above ground pools to airbeds to stand-up paddle boards and inflatable spas. So lots of different categories throughout the company. A lot of GM.
That's really interesting. And I'm kind of curious because you mentioned a lot of toys that are very like summer friendly. So is summer kind of the big peak season for you guys, or are you guys busy kind of throughout the year? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, airbeds is a pretty consistent year-round business, so that keeps us busy year-round. But there's definitely a seasonal aspect to our business. But you'd be surprised, at the holiday if somebody wants to, buy their family member a stand-up paddleboard or, some sort of really awesome gift looking forward to the next summer. they will. And there's still quite a bit of the country that's hot all year round.
Yeah,
So
good point.
our U.S. headquarters is in Arizona, so they do quite a good business there, and unfortunately never get a cool down time.
Okay.
Kind of like us right now.
So I'm curious, Allison, just because you have such a deep background on the retailer side, you did the financial planning side, you did the merchandising side, and then I know you did a little bit of the planning side as well, kind of towards the end. What kind of big lessons did you bring from the retailer side into the supplier world that you're like, man, I'm really glad that I saw the other side of this behind the curtain, and that's really set me up for success as a supplier?
Yeah, I think knowing the priorities of the merchant teams and kind of understanding what their days look like and how to support them rather than, just get the answers that we need from a vendor side has been really helpful. And so when I first left Walmart, I kind of explained to people, like, my job is to be the liaison between Walmart and, my Shanghai based company, and help them understand, why are we being asked these things? Why is this coming up now when it should have been weeks before? Or, um, you know, Charity and I were talking earlier today, like, if somebody calls and, they need like a market analysis today, it's because they need it today. Like, we're upset that there's short timelines a lot of the time, but that's the amount of focus time that they have, is like their boss came to them yesterday and now they have to give the answer today. And so anticipating those sort of things coming and what their timelines look like, and just constantly staying on top of the business and knowing a call could come at any time with a question, and being able to take care of them right away without,
Right.
too much time to get back to them.
I was going to say, Allison is one of the very few buyers who did not call me at 5 in the morning. So thank you, Allison.
Yeah,
for
I
that.
still don't do 5 o'clock in the morning. My husband's here. I'm an 8:30er if you're lucky.
So that's really, really helpful, Allison. And I think maybe for the benefit again of those that are joining us, kind of zoomed out, can you give us at a really high level, what is the role of the buyer? So it's, coming from the supplier world. So I worked in the supplier world for a really, really long time as well. And, you kind of maybe
She's like 18. She's like, really, really long time.
like 2 months. No, it's fine. But you kind of, for some businesses, you meet with the buyer once a year during line review, and then maybe you get 4 emails from them a year, and you hope one of them is a commit email. But really, what is the role of the buyer? What are the things that you guys are kind of charged with doing at Walmart?
Yeah, and I mean, I'll be honest, it's changed over the past 3 years since I've been there. So, definitely take everything I say with a grain of salt. I apologize if an F-bomb drops right now. You have been warned. So, it's different now because there's a senior merchant, and now there's associate merchants along with each of the businesses, which can be a really useful setup. But talking from, kind of the senior buyer aspect of it, or I'm trying to think of what they even call themselves now, senior merchant director, it's different every year. There's a new title every year. And so, you know who I'm talking about. But they are essentially the strategy setup. And so they're taking, their analysis from prior years. They're looking at a market landscape, and their job is to say, okay, here's where we are today, and here's where we're going for whatever time frame it is. And then, conveying that to their leadership, and selling that to their leadership for their buy-in. So they're as much of a salesperson as, anyone that's coming to pitch them a product. And then once they have their leadership's buy-in, they have to go back to their team and their support teams and get them to buy into it to kind of proceed with that strategy. So their, setup is at Walmart to be the market leader, to maintain, the lowest price, in a market that is really difficult right now. But their job is to essentially take their categories and make it essentially the best in the world. easier said than done. And then to, take everyone along with them on the journey, get their planners buy-in on it so that they can actually, make commitments on a quantity that's going to be large enough or, the right assortment that will make them the market leader. And then get their replenishment manager to get it there, which is not the easiest part. But getting all of the buy-in for the cross-functional team and getting everyone working together towards essentially one goal. But they do many, 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 many other things than that, down to creating items and, fixing, item issues or, pushing, Joey down the street to help write a PO because their replenishment manager's off, for the week or whatever. There's a lot of herding cats that goes along with the mission.
I can't imagine. And you did mention, Alison, trying to get it leadership buy-in. And so, we know that Walmart will do a lot of kind of their annual shareholders meetings or just their big YBM at the beginning of the year, or even their supplier kind of growth forums. And we hear a lot from leadership on, their vision for the category or the department over the next, usually 12 to 18 months. How much of that, just kind of anecdotally speaking, your vision that you're talking about, is that top down? So it's, your VP, EVP is saying, this is where I want toys or electronics to be, versus how much of it is, hey, I'm in the weeds. I'm doing this every day. This is where we need to be a year from now.
Yeah, in true Walmart fashion, I'll say the answer is it depends. There's very different types of leaders. There's a lot of leaders that want their mission to be completed by, their buying teams. And then there's a lot of leaders that will let their buying teams come up with the mission and discover it themselves and really let them kind of take the reins for that. So I can't really give one answer on what it is because, you guys know everyone who you work with. It's easy to tell if the message is coming down from upper leadership or not. And a lot of times it's coming from upper leadership and you're not told about it. You get a large canceled order and it makes absolutely no sense. And they're telling you, and you can tell that in their voice, they're like, this makes no sense. And I understand that, but unfortunately, it's business and it's the bottom line and we have to hit a number. And so this is why the change is happening, but you're not told those things. So it's dependent on the teams, but it's also, dependent on the leaders and what they're willing to let the teams go out and do themselves. If they trust their teams, or even parts of their teams, they'll let them, take their strategy and run with it. And a lot of it is just, how independent you're going to be yourself as a buyer. If you're going to go push and show them the opportunity that's out there in the market and, provide your case as to why it makes sense, they're going to, trust you to go do that. And a lot of that information comes back from the supplier initially. So when you're pitching your strategy or where you think the opportunities are within that buyer's business, they could really, take that and escalate that up. But again, it depends. It depends on, if you're working with an extrovert buyer or, a really strong-headed leader of the team. It's a different dynamic. But as we know, it changes very often.
No, that's yes. Walmart does nothing if not keep all suppliers and everyone around you guys on your on our toes. So I think one thing that could be helpful to Alison is to help paint a picture a little bit on what a buyer's general day-to-day looks like. And I know it's going to change just depending on line review season, not line review season. But it's really easy for us as suppliers to be like, oh, I sent this email, they haven't responded. I know that I have definitely said that many times.
Yeah.
But it could be helpful, again, just kind of for the audience to help understand, how many emails were you getting as a buyer? What did that look like? And why didn't you ever respond to? I'm kidding. Allison was great. But
Stacey
what
was
happened?
one of the few that had my direct phone number.
I did. We're texting buddies. It's fine.
So how many emails did I get a day? Like hundreds. And that's not an exaggeration. You get so many emails from, Jimmy, who created this really cool widget in their garage, and there's nothing else like it out there, to, the Apples of the world wondering why, your security lock isn't on correct in store 1567 and like you know, and and the internal email is a lot too. So I'm a huge advocate for just pick up the phone and have a conversation. Um, and I'll give some, feedback on emails in a minute, and kind of how they can be most effective from the vendor side towards the buyer. But a typical day for a buyer is you're gonna be up to me way too early. And
Not 8:30.
not 8:30.
Not 8:30.
And and things have changed over the years. Back in the day I had to pull all my own reports. Now they have some fancy stuff, that pops it all up for them. But you're looking at, what did yesterday's sales do? I know as a vendor I'm not looking at daily sales as often as I did at Walmart. I'm looking more at a program and performance over time, but they can tell, a pretty good trajectory of what the business and the different categories are doing day by day. So they're going in, they're looking, what were sales yesterday? What were receipts? What were markdowns? Where's my margin coming in each day? And that helps them pinpoint if there's any issues that need to be kind of further investigated or a deeper dive into. If all of a sudden your receipts, into the store come in at negative $1 million, well, somebody accidentally had a big, keying error at a store somewhere, probably. So you spend a lot of your time in the weeds on stuff like that to get that corrected, because if you don't catch it then, going back and ever finding time for it is never going to happen. There were days that I'd walk in and the EVP would be sitting in my chair, waiting for me to come in, even if I was on time that day, just to ask you questions about where the business is going, and why have you had a 3-day downtrend, or any of that sort of thing, so that they can go when they get asked for it and be prepared to provide that information. So still as a supplier today, I spend a lot of days on Sundays working, but even at Walmart, I spent a lot of Sundays working to know when I went in on Monday morning what had happened the prior week, so that when I got questioned about it, I was going to have an answer, and it was going to be the right answer. But you spend a lot of time at Walmart in meetings, on phone calls, in meetings about other meetings. There's very little time to sit down and actually work on your strategy and focus. So it makes for a lot of really long days. And that's kind of, also why I brought up, like, if they're calling you and they need a market landscape, it's because they need it right then and there, because that's the, 30 minutes that they have blocked that they can actually spend the time on it. So being ahead of those questions is really important. When you're working on your emails to your merchant teams, if it's going to be more than 3 full sentences, don't send it. I'm not going to read it as a buyer. I wasn't going to read it. If I knew it was important and I had a good relationship with you, I'd at least pick up the phone and go, why the hell did you send me such a novel of an email? Like, is it important? What does it say? And have a 30-second phone call instead of spending the time to read through it. And it's just the truth of how much time you really have during the day. So, the way that I asked for emails to be written, and I still do this today, is the action of whatever needs to be done in the email needs to be the first sentence, and then some bullets after that. And if it's anything longer than that, you need to just request a call. And I know that's kind of funny to say, because getting a buyer on the phone is not the easiest thing. So I do recommend setting up, a monthly touch base, call that at least that's going to happen every month, and you're going to get that correspondence. But there is very little time in a buyer's day to do anything outside of, what their internal expectations are. So your job is to make that easier.
No, that's actually really helpful, Allison, and I hope I never sent you a novel. I probably did. It's fine. It's fine.
I would have just picked up the phone. It's okay.
That's why you called me all the time.
The good thing about being in electronics is I got to test out different devices and stuff. So I could always have a different phone number. No one would ever know who it was.
So kind of to your point, Allison, and talking about how many emails that buyers receive, and then you just don't have time to get through 300 emails a day, because who does? But can you maybe give some tips or best practices to suppliers to say, like, hey, if it is this falls squarely within my realm as a buyer, I totally would have read this, I totally would have responded to this, versus this has nothing to do with me, you're not talking to the right person. go talk to the RM or SSM or whoever it is? Like, can you give some maybe just general guidance on that?
Yeah. If it can be Googled, don't email it. If you can find it on the supplier support Facebook page, don't email it. If you can easily phone another supplier friend and get the answer, do not email it. And that's exactly what I would have said back to you. Just because, one, that's kind of my personality, but at the same time, like, if there's an easier way, please do that first. Try all routes before you come to the merchant team, because there's just not enough time. And, they expect that you know everything. Yeah, that's the expectation. We know that's not the truth. But there are a lot of resources out there to go out and at least take an attempt to figure it out yourself. Things like disputes, things, like, I don't even know. I feel like it all comes back to the buyer eventually, to be honest. But, item setup, there's all kinds of different things that could go to many other parties before they get there. Like your supplier agreement. Like, if you need your name changed on that, the buyer's not going to know how to do that. If you get bought out by another company, they're not going to know how to change your parent company. You don't know what your two-factor authentication code is. They don't either. Just things that unfortunately you do need to go through, like the help desk or something like that for. There's a lot of different things, but I like to think I was as helpful as I could be, in times that I had the time to help, and at least send you over to the right people. Whether I could help or not. But, in the way that Walmart is today, there's so many new team members that they don't even know that some of these support teams exist. So I would say, just try to use every other resource before you go and set the expectation, expecting your merchant team. I would say any of them to reply: the planner, the replenishment manager, the associate merchants, the head merchant. And it's not for disrespect in any means. They truly have so many other things on their plate that they just don't have time to get to it.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally fair, Allison. And just, I can share a couple of resources, and Allison, I'm sure you've got a few resources as well too, just since we've got a crowd of buyers or suppliers. But like Allison mentioned,
that would be awkward.
It's fine. Surprise.
Oh shit, I'll see my way out.
No, but the Facebook supplier support. Well, so there's a Facebook group called the Walmart Supplier Support Group. It's excellent.
I'd say it answers 80% of my questions right now.
Yeah, I think it's got like 11,000 members. If you guys are not a part of it today, highly recommend that you join it.
But I'll also say, be careful what you ask on there. Do not trash talk anyone. When I was at Walmart, I was still a member of that organization on Facebook, and I definitely monitored what my suppliers were doing on there.
I've definitely seen admins of the group be like, friendly reminder, Walmart is here.
Yes.
Please watch what you say.
I mean, it's a very useful resource. Just be careful in the way that you say things.
I agree. I'm going to shamelessly plug SupplierWiki, of course, while you guys are here. It is a Supply Pike Run free resource. We do articles, we do resources, free ebooks. We have free webinars almost every week about various topics, not only to do with Walmart, but also with Target, Kroger, and Amazon as well. So that's just SupplierWiki. You guys probably know about it if you're here at this event. It's a SupplierWiki event, but I highly recommend it. Any other resources you can think of, Allison, just for Google?
Just keep networking. And honestly, if you don't know the answer, you're going to be able to find somebody that does. Everybody has been through a situation before with Walmart at some point. Nothing has never happened before, well, I shouldn't say that too soon. But, just use your resources and, ask the right questions. If you're not asking it the right way, try asking it a different way to get the answer that you need. But, become friends with Stacy. She knows everyone and can send you to someone, or I have my link card up here. I'm happy to help answer questions or send you to someone that I think would at least know the answer. Because it's hard.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff going on.
It's hard.
And that's why I was initially hired on to Best Way, was to help with that bridge. And so, I've tried to do that as much as I can, but I still phone a friend every day, probably. It's nobody can know everything.
Right, right. No, you're so right. And kind of to that, building off of that, Allison, I know you mentioned, making sure that as a supplier, you are as independent as you can be before reaching out to the buyer. I'm curious, this is more fun facts, trivia. Are there facets, when you were a buyer that you're like, I really wish that my suppliers knew that I was going through this so that they know that, if I can't get to an answer or if I can't give them this piece of information, this is why. And hopefully it's to help, again, suppliers in the crowd understand their buyer's perspective before they reach out and send an email.
Yeah, there's a couple things that I would say, Walmart is a really big name, and they're really afraid to be in the news on anything negative. So a lot of decisions are made not necessarily because it's in the best interest of the market landscape or their market share, but possibly because of politics. And that's really hard on the buyers. That comes from all the way at the top down. And they can't just flat out tell you like, well, I didn't buy yours because so and so has a EVP that used to work here and they're friends with, Joe Schmo up down in the, officer's hallway. And so, they'll get open doored and, somebody's feelings will be hurt. So, I hate to say that, but it's just the truth of it, that there's a lot of politics behind it. There's a lot of strategy things that happen that you aren't aware of. Right now, I'm sitting here looking at one of my buys for next spring going, man, they're going to lose market share really bad if this is their only plan of buying this assortment from me. But in the back of my head, I have a pretty good inkling that, one of my competitors brought a much better, better option to them. And they're really probably going to gain market share, but it's not going to be with me. And so remembering like you have competition out there and they're not going to tell you what they did with your competition. You're going to have to wait to see it on the shelf. Some of them will. I did. Some of them are open to that, or at least to say, you're, a competitor of yours is going to have that space. Like, stop telling me every day you're going to lose market share because I know I'm not. I'm going to lose market share with you, but not necessarily, in the category. And then the other one is just the internal pressure and the decisions that get made from the top down. They're not going to call and say, well, my SVP has decided we need to cut, $40 million in inventory by the end of this quarter, and that's next week. And so this is why I'm doing this. We weren't able to say that as directly as we would have liked to, that's for sure. And political correctness is still a very strong thing there. So just knowing that everything that's coming at you and every decision that's made or not made isn't necessarily coming from that single person. There's a much broader aspect. Did that answer the question?
No, that's really helpful. And I kind of wanted to build off of what you were saying, Allison, about, I've said this many times, but Allison is a very, very open, transparent buyer. And not every buyer is that way for various reasons. Is there anything that suppliers can do to help to foster some of that relationship a little bit? Like, you may not be on a texting basis with all of your buyers, but at least how do you get to a point where you can say, hey, if you're going to cut me, at least let me know. And so I understand why, and I can communicate that with my own teams. How do you build that relationship?
Yeah, the first thing is live up to what you say you're going to do. Do not overpromise and underdeliver. Don't get caught in a lie. I can't tell you how many vendors I had get caught in lies throughout the whole time. And the last thing you want to do is get, bought in on this great plan and sell it to your leadership and walk your EVP through it. And then, come back and say, just kidding. I don't have the iPhone case for the new launch. We don't even have an iPhone case that's going to fit the new phone. It's that never happened to us, but but it's it's a really disappointing thing that'll happen, and that buyer is never ever gonna forget. And the stories will go on for every buyer after that. So transparency and honesty is so important. If you have something that there's a production problem and it's not going to make it on the boat on time, tell them the second you find out, hey, red flag, something could be coming. I'm doing everything possible to not let it happen, but it is a potential problem.
No. Yeah, I know that makes a lot of sense. It's something we talk about a lot at Supply Pike during our webinars and things like that. It's the importance of
proactive,
consistent communication.
You being transparent with them will help them be transparent with you as well.
Right. And bringing solutions
to the table, having, your data and your numbers together, knowing way more about the business than anyone ever should. So when a question comes up, you can answer it right away. Trust is just a big piece of it. I've had situations where, I share pieces of my strategy and it shows up on, my competitors' shelves before I ever even get it onto the shelf. So knowing that I can trust that, vendor to keep it on the Walmart account and not take it back to other accounts is really important. But as far as just like cadence of talking, I know it's not the easiest, and you just kind of have to feel that person out and what they're comfortable with. Some buyers are going to want to talk more often than others. I wish some of them would talk to vendors more. I think, the amount of time that's spent on just, being in their competitors, seeing what's on the shelf in their store, in different departments and different ideas can really benefit them. But you just kind of have to feel out that team and understand what kind of communication they want. But first and foremost, just, never have to break that terrible news to them that you misspoke and what you said is not actually going to happen. Accidents happen, mistakes happen, but just make sure you're transparent about it.
Right. No, that's really helpful, Allison. So I kind of want to shift gears a little bit from to a little bit more of a tactical side of buying. And so, we throw terms like buyers and RMs and SSMs and insert acronym here.
Is there still SSMs? Does anyone know? Is that still a thing?
Yeah, I think
it
so.
is. Okay.
I think so.
Shows how much I know.
But I'm kind of curious, generally speaking, I'm, speaking very generally, of course. There's kind of the buyer role whose job is to kind of actually decide on the product, pick the strategy. You have the planner who kind of controls the purse strings, so to speak, make sure there's a budget in place, and the replenishment team that actually kind of does the ops behind the scenes, make sure the product gets there. Could you talk through maybe the relationship between these three teams? Just how often are you guys talking? What does that look like? How closely in step are you? Is it, you make the decision and then get passed on to the next team, or just what does that look like?
Guess what? It depends. I had, cross-functional teams that we went to every meeting together. We sat in every meeting together. We sat together every day. We went to the layout center together. We did everything together. And those were the best teams I was on because we only had to hear it once. We didn't have to play telephone and just the buyer went to the meeting and they come back and, tell the planner, who then, leans over the RM and says, hey, did you hear about this? And then, the SVP comes walking in the pod and like, hey, I heard that this is happening. And you're like, oh, news to me. So, it depends, but the best cross-functional teams are going to spend pretty much all of their time together. It's not at a really good ratio, I would say right now. For example, one department I'm in, I have 10 buyers to one replenishment manager and one financial planner. Yeah.
Split across all 10 buyers?
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
great.
And so it used to be a 1-to-1 split, but the responsibilities of that one buyer used to be a lot, broader as well. Rumors are they're trying to work through that a little bit. There was some news that came out last week and they started kind of bringing in some, different complexities to those jobs and switching it up a little bit. But I don't know how you as a planner can follow 10 buyers around all day. You can't. I always, make sure from a supplier that if it's, something that impacts everyone, that they're all on the email. Even if it's a question for the buyer, but, they need to be aware of it, make sure they're on the email. I've had team members ask me, why are you including all these people? This is just to be coming to me, and respectfully, I'll, direct the emails to however they would like me to. But I will say from that side of it, if you can say it once and have the whole team hear it at the same time, it will streamline the whole process significantly, especially when action needs taken. So, calling the buyer and having a private conversation with them that, they bought 50,000 units. Well, now you can only make 40,000 units. Oh, and it's going to be 3 weeks later and the PO needs to be revised. The buyer doesn't have anything to do with any of the actions that you just talked through. So making them aware of it is very important because they have to report on that business and, be responsible for it. But every action that has to be taken to make sure your buy gets decreased by 10,000, make sure your PO gets written, make sure the PO revision gets put in for 3 weeks later is all done by different support teams than the buyer. So include as many as you can as they're willing to let you include in the conversation. Be respectful, of course, if they don't want you to include them. I've had many people ask me not to include certain parties. Product development doesn't need to be on this email. To me, they did, but, to them, they don't want them, in every facet of the business. So, fine, we won't include them in that. And, just make sure we include them in elsewise. But if you know that somebody else is going to have to touch that to make the action be accomplished, make sure you include them in the conversation.
Okay. No, that's really, really helpful. And I think you kind of brought up a really illuminating point because, just so I've never worked on the Walmart side, just being on the supplier side.
Lucky.
I'm in our minds where it's like, oh, the buyer is the final say on every single thing. And so it is helpful to kind of understand like the buyer may not know how to do a PO revision. And so this is who you need to include on that correspondence instead.
Yeah. And if they don't, pass it on and the PO revision doesn't get done, it's still the buyer's fault. If they do pass it on and the PO revision doesn't get done, it's still the buyer's fault. That's unfortunately just kind of how it goes there is the buyer is responsible to lead that whole team and make sure everything gets accomplished. And so, there's bigger conversations to be had if your team's not doing their work. But they need to be involved, but the doers are even more important to be involved.
Right. And I'm kind of curious, more buyer trivia. So when you were a buyer at Walmart, how many suppliers called on you? What did that? And I know it kind of varies depending on department, but again, hopefully some helpful context to be like, I know your email feels like the most important, that there are X number of other suppliers out there.
Yeah. Everybody in this world makes a phone case, if you didn't know that. There's also a million different phones that need phone cases, so everybody kind of does their own thing. Even though the iPhone and the Galaxy are sexy, there's a lot of other phones in this world. Buying was probably, close to 60 vendors, in the electronic accessory space. But I will say when I was on the toys business just before I left Walmart, I did boys action figures and construction. And the way licenses and properties go is really difficult. And so we were, upwards of the higher 80s, like 87 suppliers or something. Because, one person had Friday Nights at Freddy's and the other person had Spider-Man. And, there's just so many players in this space. But to have your market share and to keep the business going, you have to do business with all of them.
I cannot imagine being, responsible for.
And that's just vendors that you did business with. I can't tell you how many are still
That's
trying to do business with you. There's even more that would like to be on your shelf.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. Like I cannot imagine. So kind of along those lines, zooming out again a little bit, what to you was like an A+ supplier where, not naming names, but where you're like, hey, this supplier always did XYZ and I knew that I could go to them every time. Like, what are some of those characteristics that you're like, hey, best practices, if you want to stand out in the mind of your buyer, this is what you should be doing?
Yeah, I talked through it a little bit, but knowing your market landscape, knowing what the competition is doing, knowing, where the market is going, so you can give that information at the drop of an email. It's really important to have. So knowing that I could call, so I'm not going to give any names, but supplier XYZ and know that I would get a whole, consumer layout of who's working on, buying from my shelf I'm probably going to call them first to get that answered. And then, hey, now you have the buyer on the phone, and that question you wanted to ask that you sent in 3 emails that haven't been answered yet, you can ask that question now. You know, definitely going to lean into those people that are on top of their numbers, on top of their analytics. You know, I can say, hey, you've been, you know, item number 3 for 6 weeks. You know, why the heck are you item number 9 now? And I hope you know the answer. You know, knowing those sorts of things rather than having to get a call back the next day because they have to go, you know, talk to their, you know, analytics team that's supporting 5 other retailers as well, and, you know, 10 other salespeople. Just knowing that they're in the know on their business and every aspect of it, I'm definitely going to rely on them first before, you know, calling supplier ABC.
Yeah, and so this is just me being curious too. So there's a lot of kind of market research out there and resources out there. And as we all know, there are some heavy hitter companies that can afford to spend the money on your category, your Nielsen, your IRI numbers. And then there are some guys that are like, hey, I got 2 SKUs in Walmart and I'm really stoked about that. And I maybe can't afford a $10,000 Nielsen report. How can those kind of small to mid-size companies stand out if, you know, maybe they can't get category information, but they are doing what to kind of stand out in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, staying on top of what the latest in the industry is, you know, electronics was really important in that, knowing what the next devices were going to be, when they were going to drop, what colors are they going to drop in. We're moving from a 30 pin to a lightning cable. Now we're on a USB-C. You know, knowing all of those types of things about specifically your industry is really important. And even if you have 2 items on the shelf, I think you can, you know, warrant knowing that information. Because that's how you're gaining those 2 items on the shelf. But I would say, you know, unfortunately, it takes money to make money. And so, you know, maybe it's not subscribing to MPD and IRI and, you know, Profitero and all the different options, but, you know, working with companies like Supply Pike and other, you know, options there where they can help you at least nail down where it's important to spend your time is going to save you a lot of money on the back end working with Walmart when they call you for the information and you don't have it, or, you know, you ship the PO a day late and now you owe, you know, 30 grand or whatever the fines are anymore. I work in an all import business, so I'm not good at it.
Oh, thank you. Oh, we're starting to get some audience
whole
questions
deck
in.
there.
I know. Okay, so I'm going to ask one last fun question, and then we're going to go into audience Q&A.
I thought they were all fun.
Okay, I'm glad. Is there a success story that you can share just kind of during your tenure at Walmart? And again, you know, you don't have to name names or anything like that, but hey, we did this with a supplier. We partnered to do this really cool thing, and you know, it did gangbusters at Walmart, and you know, that's one of the best memories that you have. Any sort of fun stories like that?
Yeah. This is a little bit of a different one, and I'm not going to give the supplier's name because it was done under private brand anyway, so it doesn't really matter. You wouldn't be able to pick them out off the shelf. But I had a really good vendor that was honestly just fantastic at analytics. You know, every Monday I had reports in there that was telling me exactly what was happening with every item. I didn't even have to go look at my own reports. I knew what the answers were. Usually before I got there, but usually because I was late. But we actually
8:30. I'm putting that on the shirt for you.
8:30 if we're lucky is what it should say. But you know, I was fortunate enough to be able to work with them to bring a new program into ODM specific phone cases. And so you know, everybody knows who the Walmart customer is. If you don't know, the number 1 item at Walmart is not bananas. It's actually phone minutes, the cards to buy phone minutes.
To update my Walmart trivia. I was still saying bananas this week.
Nope, not
phone
bananas.
minutes. Got it.
Yeah, so it's the phone minutes and the cards that are purchased for prepaid phones. And so they do a huge volume of prepaid phones. But, you know, it's the Nokias, the LGs, the, you know, Huawei's of the world that have these devices that, you know, you don't necessarily have a phone case on the shelf easily for, like the sexy iPhone or the sexy Galaxy. And so we put together an ODM program where I actually had them working directly with TracFone on the devices that they were going to be bringing out for these prepaid devices, and cross merchandising directly next to the phone these case options, and it ended up being our top velocity turning items, and a really healthy program, to the point that we were able to cross merchandise on Black Friday pallets with the devices at full price, because everybody needs a phone case, and that's your first security and insurance on your phone. And so if they're spending and getting the great deal on Black Friday for, I don't know, a $15 device, they're still going to pay $10 to put the case on it at a way too high margin.
It's fine.
But really just great partnership, but was able to lean into them because I knew that they knew their stuff, and I could rely on them to take care of it, and then just kind of have a seamless, streamlined process with the phone manufacturer, the cell phone buyer, what they were going to be bringing into the modular, and then my vendor, and the program is still there today.
That's awesome.
There's a phone case on the Universal mod that we call the Alison phone case. It's not actually called that, but it's been there since I bought it because it's the top selling Universal
You need
case.
to trademark that. Tell Walmart.
And it's a pretty awesome one. Not many people buy Universal phone cases, but
we're gonna add Doug
need
McMillan on Twitter. I got you. And I'm curious, was that an initiative that they pushed to you, or did you kind of bubble that up to them?
No, I brought it to them, but I brought it to them because I could trust them, and I could trust that they were going to hold their confidentiality with these devices that would be coming into the market, and working far enough out with these companies that at launch of these new prepaid devices, there was going to be accessories for them. So the trust, and just the knowledge that they had was a no-brainer for me to go with them than anyone else.
No, that's really interesting and super helpful. And
I hope everybody's okay. I learned last night that my Great Danes like to howl to fire trucks when they go by.
Oh, that's a fun
Isn't
lesson.
that interesting?
Yeah, that's great.
I didn't even know they were really like howlers, but we call them our first responders now.
Oh my gosh, it's so cute. Okay, so now I'm going to make Alison earn her charcuterie and wine by asking some hard questions from the audience. First one's a good one. It's a doozy. So, you kind of talked a little bit earlier about just how difficult the landscape is today. You guys have probably heard unprecedented times, TM, more times than you can count. Everybody knows inflation is just on the up and up. Obviously, we're still working through a lot.
I am in the business of inflation,
Yes,
literally.
Hey, but but we also have, just global supply chain issues still happening. So the topic of price increases is what this question is about. And it is becoming kind of a bigger and bigger part of the business. So in addition to kind of the business landscape being what it is, you mentioned a lot of the different fines that are happening, a lot of the different new programs that are happening. And so
put an RFID tag on it, but don't charge us anymore.
yeah, that one, collect pickup program. That's a new one. And so obviously, this is a very big deal for suppliers to be thinking about because it eats directly into their margins. Can you talk about, Alison, just when you were a buyer, how does a supplier broach the topic of price increases? Obviously, it's not a topic anyone wants to talk about, but what is a way that a supplier can kind of set themselves up for success with their buyer and also kind of maintain that longevity of the relationship? Because you don't want to propose something and go, well, you're out the next mod, thanks.
Yeah, cost increases are not easy conversations at all on either side. They're really hard internal conversations to talk through because a lot of times, it does take leadership approval to go through and take those cost increases if it's, a big enough item and it's impactful enough. Know that going into it, you need to know where every single half a penny of that increase is coming from. And know that Walmart has people on staff that their only job is to sit and look at the cost projections of raw materials and where they are today and where they're going by day. and they will probably outsmart you on any of those, bits of research. So you need to know as much as you possibly can going into it. So if it's, a 5-cent increase and 2 cents of it are coming from, increased labor prices, man. Oh, it's right there too. Sorry. Distracted. So 2 cents of it are labor, 1 cent of it is raw materials, and gas prices are going up. Make sure you know exactly what that breakout is. Because the first thing I would do when I received any sort of conversation or email on a cost increase coming is send it over to my my support teams that could tell me what was actually happening with the raw materials. And, oh, well, they actually dropped 2 months ago, so how come I didn't get a cost decrease then? We should be flat now. Where is the transportation hang up coming from that you're saying that that's going to cost me more? And, there is a reality around you might not be on the next mod because this conversation has gone really south. So just make sure, it's worth it. um, you know, uh, it depends on the item, but like a 1% cost increase might be better for you to eat than to lose the whole program altogether. So again, have transparent conversations, share with them what's happening, and make sure it's true. Make sure they're not going to be able to come back to you and say, not based off what we can see. I think, if anybody here works in imports, like how many times have they come back to us, lately and said, well, the currency exchange, and yeah, but it was better before, it was worse before, and we didn't go the other way. Or for the next 6 months it's not going to change. And so just make sure, and you don't necessarily need to know it specifically, but somebody at your company needs to know exactly what that breakdown is and what that meaningful decision to pass on that cost increase is going to do, and is it worth it before it happens. It also can put you at risk against a competitor. They can easily, unfortunately find out when things are happening, maybe not through Walmart, maybe through some other way. But, if you're going to go up 10 cents, I'm going to go down 20. And it can get really fishy on what's going to happen with your whole business altogether that way. Or, well, I'll drop 20% across every item I have on the mod to have the rest of their items. It becomes a negotiating tactic from your competitors as well. So yeah. It's hard. Be transparent. It's a real thing. Just know that it's definitely a risky decision, and they will do everything possible to not take it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think kind of adding off of what you're saying, Allison, we had a discussion around item swap on our very first Summer Hours event. And I think even talking about price increases, that risk is compounded even more with item swap, because before you could theoretically only update items during line review season. So you were kind of protected-ish, at least for a little bit. But now it's like, okay, well, that's great. But your competition, like you said, is going to decrease their price by 20 cents next week. Like, I'm just going to item swap you.
Yeah. And as terrible it is for it to, your competitors can do that, you can do that to them too. So yeah. Remember that. And also know that, especially right now at Walmart, inventory is a really, really hot topic. And item swap's not as easy when you're heavy on inventory.
Right, right.
So
yes, that's a very good point. Okay, so next question. This is kind of a fun one because I think you lead the analytics team, so I think this is a fun one. Can you talk about how forecasting and replenishment has evolved in a post-COVID era? We've all we've been on the roller coaster ride, right? So extreme shortages in 2020. Try to catch up in 2021, now excess inventory in 2022. How fun has your job been for the last 3 years?
It's hard because I'm actually in an industry that when there is, hard times or a recession or a pandemic, my business actually excels. The fact that people had to get outside and do stuff was fantastic for our business. So it's a good thing and a bad thing now that I have, salespeople at other retailers that have never experienced a non-COVID year before, and what that looks like going forward. And oh, well, my buy's down, not mine specifically. I'm not disclosing any information, but theoretically, my buy's down 20% last year, but I don't know why, because sales are great, right now. And it's definitely different. They were scared in COVID in the beginning. All retailers were, and a lot of orders got, canceled or held. And then sales were great in a lot of different areas. And you had a lot of people spending their time at Walmart because it was still open. So you really have to take the time. And if you don't have the availability of it, because maybe you weren't a vendor back that far, reach out to your planning contacts at Walmart and ask them to help you get pre-COVID analysis. So, they can go back. I mean, they can go back forever in their data, but the planners can easily go back 10 years easily. You can, if you have that, if you had the business, that many years back, but keeping that, documenting it, saving it. So every year you can go back and look at that as you're planning the future years to be able to say, okay, that was a tough year because COVID, but the year before was, also a tough year because it was really not a good hot weather year. And actually the year before that was really hot and really great sales. So you can start taking averages and looking at the business over as many years as you possibly can. But it's not easy, and there's always different stuff, and there's holiday flips. I mean, even in a normal year, there's a million things to get around. So it takes a lot of time. And sometimes you don't know how high is until you get there, on a good sales. Spend a lot of time looking at, other aspects. Sales were good, but you were 80% in stock. What if you were 100? Doing the analysis into every week, what you could have done is important. And having that readily available so that when you go and you need to push back on a possible buy for the next year, you have the facts to say, well, over these, last 9 years, this is, the average of what happened. And we think you're really going to miss an opportunity here. And having those facts, it just goes back to having as much data, and you can't argue fact. Walmart will argue with you, but you can't argue. You can't argue fact when it comes to truly saying this was the number and this is what the opportunity was. So as much as you can back up any recommendation with, have it available.
Short of calling you an oracle, what do you just off the cuff? What are we're already starting to buy for 2023, obviously. What are your predictions?
I'm on 24 right now.
Oh my gosh. I don't even know what that means.
That's strategy for 2024 next week.
Woo! Yeah. What do you think 2023 is going to look like? Just, are we going to maintain? Are we going to, what are we thinking? Just.
It's hard to say. There's a recession coming. We all know that, but I also only paid $3.25 for gas today. So gas is getting back to normal. Things are starting to get a little bit back to whatever normal is. The country's evolving on what it means to go to the workplace and what people buy. The past few months, the dress clothes, makeup, hair, appliance industries have been off the charts because everyone's going back out in public again. They have to get up and go to work every day and look presentable.
Funny story. We actually found an old email at Supply Pike I think we sent it in
May. Say something I sent you a long time ago.
I really should find those. But I think it was sometime in May 2020, and our operations team were like, all right, everybody, we're going to plan to be back by the end of May. It's going to be great. And then you're right. We weren't back to the start of 2021. So it's kind of crazy. Okay. So in the interest of time, I'm going to ask 2 final questions.
Yeah. And I don't have anywhere to be. So if you guys have questions or want my info, I'm happy to share it.
Alison's
happy
awesome.
to help however I can.
And she will tell it like it is, that's why I love working with her. So one is a spicy one. We won't end on the spicy one. We'll end on a fun one. But we'll start with the spicy one first. So we've heard the term open door. I think you mentioned that as well. what does it mean to open door your buyer? How and when can you open door your buyer? Please explain why this is a nuclear option to suppliers.
Let me think for a moment here. So open door in Walmart terms is essentially going to the next level up of management and sharing a concern that wasn't necessarily addressed by whomever. So if it was your senior buyer and you have to go to your DMM, that would be considered an open door. If it was your senior buyer and you go to Doug McMillan, that is considered an executive level open door.
So I should not tweet Doug McMillan.
You're welcome to do whatever you want. There's vendors that have been in trouble on social media before that are no longer vendors at Walmart, and vice versa. People that worked at Walmart that said things on social media before that are no longer with Walmart. So that is up to you. But open dooring is used internally at Walmart as well. And I think that's a much more open door approach where, if a decision was made or something unethical happened, you can go to the next management level up and it will be addressed. And that's pretty safe. They said in the last one, y'all were happy to hear like real conversation. Just know that if you go and open door somebody and it's not a true ethical issue where they're probably going to lose their job, you are probably going to have a business impact from that. It is, like you said, a nuclear bomb option. If there are other alternatives that you're not getting what you need from the situation, try to get creative. Try to ask it a different way. Try to approach it a different way. If you're, trying all through email, or, if I had everybody emailing me that I had when I had 87 suppliers every day, which we pretty much do, it's impossible. So try everything possible before you go ahead and open door. The policy is never going to go away. Technically, every company has it. You just call the person's boss. But it is kind of seen as a tattletale. And that is often will ruin your relationship with that person at Walmart and has a high possibility to impact your business with them in the future, unfortunately. Yep. It's not supposed to. In the handbook, it doesn't say that. But
no, that's helpful, and hopefully that was sufficiently spicy for everybody. No, but I think it's important.
My company has chosen to never open door.
Yeah. No, I think that's helpful, and it's, again, our hope with kind of conversations like these is that we can get additional perspectives, because you've been on both sides, and I know I'm good friends with a lot of buyers and kind of have seen both sides, but it's really easy as a supplier to be like, I'm really upset about this scenario and I want to do kind of the worst possible thing, but we want to be able to say like, hey, here are your options. Really think about your options before you utilize your option. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and kind of end it on a more fun note. But can you talk, Allison? So obviously, as a buyer, you guys are responsible for doing a lot of just everyday, just modular buys and things like that. But there are also a lot of promo feature opportunities, end caps, Black Friday, just, and any sort of features. What is that cadence usually? What does that look like? If I'm a supplier and maybe, hey, I don't know that I have enough experience to do, kind of an on-shelf thing, but I'd love to go for an end cap. How do you bring that up to a buyer? What does that look like? Is it during the normal line review process, or?
Yeah, I mean, it should be through the normal line review process, but if there's, some kind of out of timeline event that's going to happen that you are saying is going to be worth, taking shelf space, don't shy away from it. If you have some creative idea or some really impactful item that's going to make a difference, make sure you bring it up to them, even if it's not in the line review cadence. I will tell you, for a while, and I think it has changed a little bit now. It was really hard to go outside of kind of the book when it came to features. It had to go into a system, and then that system decided what stores got what and how many they got, and it was done at a department level, and there was just all kinds of rules, to the point that we were having to like make up features to hold as feature blocks for exciting opportunities to come, so that we could at least, try it out. So it isn't as easy as like, oh, this is going to change the world, we need to get it in the store. And it's like, yeah, well, every other buyer said that as well. And so every buyer is fighting for that space. The stores technically own 20% of that space. And so you're really only sending feature space to 80% of this feature space that they have. So, bringing it to them, make sure you're, bringing it to them when it makes sense. One, you're far enough out on your logistics timeline that, you can produce and everything and it makes sense. If you can bring it at the line review time period, do that. But if it's revolutionary and it's, really going to make a difference or, change the trajectory of the business, make sure you bring it forward to them. They'll ship out outside of the rules if it's different enough. Make it simple for the stores. If you have some really small product, make the investment to put it in a corrugate fixture so they can just set it and forget it. Make sure you're giving your recommendation on the flow plan, exactly how you'd like to do it. If you want to ship by container, or, you have your domestic locations you want to ship from, provide that to them and give them the option to choose, the fact that you've already done the work for them, or they have to go reinvent the wheel. So that's one thing we'll always do is, hey, here's our recommendation on how we'd flow it to the stores. Take with it what you want. But I would say 80% of the time that you just save them that much time on doing the analysis of where they think it should go, they're just going to take yours and move with it.
No, that's really helpful, Alison. So I think in the interest of time, we're going to go ahead and wrap this conversation up. Thank you so much, Alison, for your time.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, and
thanks for having me.
And the super candid conversations.